right, there we go. We're live on Facebook now. Thank you all for joining. This webinar will have language interpretation, so please select the language you want to listen to by clicking on the globe at the bottom of your screen. It will give you an option between English and Spanish. If you're joining from a phone or a tablet, then you click the three little dots that say more, and that's how you can access the language services. Por favor, seleccione su idioma en el icono del globo que está en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Y si está conectado a través de un teléfono o tableta, el icono de interpretación de idiomas está en los tres puntos que dicen more o más. Asegúrese de hacer clic en done y listo. De done o listo y ya vamos a empezar. So thank you all for joining us. I'm going to hand it off here right now to Yaz, who's going to give a quick presentation. I hope everyone's staying warm this afternoon. And Yaz, go for it.
Thanks, JP. Again, thank you everyone for being here for the first community update of the ATX Mobility Coalition. My name is Yasmin Smith. I am a born and raised Austinite. I am co-chair of PUMA, People United for Mobility Action, and Director of Justice and Advocacy for the Austin Area Urban League, and have the extreme pleasure of being one of the founding members of the ATX Mobility Coalition. So before we begin, we wanted to give a little bit of background and context to who we are. So what is the ATX Mobility Coalition? You may be asking. We are a coalition of local groups and advocates fighting for equity and mobility justice. We are committed to racial and environmental justice, as well as worker and tenants' rights. We strive to build collaborative, community-led processes that can guide city mobility projects and increase transparency and accountability in governance. So you might be asking yourself, okay, Yaz, that was a lot of words. So what does that mean practically? Well, let's give you a couple of examples of what the Mobility Coalition has already done. Number one, we were instrumental in the equity nuances you see that have been overlaid on Project Connect. That was partly for advocating for the $300 million of anti-displacement monies going to those initiatives. It was also sharing information about Project Connect so that the community at large could be engaged. We also worked on an equity tool, neighborhood level strategies for that $300 million, KPIs, and the creation of the Community Advisory Committee, the CAC. We worked on the ATP board membership, and the ATP is the governing body of Project Connect, who's going to make it actually come to effectuation. So we were really instrumental in making sure that community voices and community members were on that ATP board membership call of action. And then most recently, we've been working on a community engagement framework. Even though we did so much work in making sure that those equity nuances we're talking about were literally bled into the legally binding documents of Project Connect, that doesn't mean that the implementation part of this puzzle is complete. And in order to make sure that everything we envision, everything we put into those legal body documents to ensure that there's community voices heard and listened to at this implementation stage, that all of that still has to be done. And so in order to do that, we put together a community engagement framework to help out our partners on the ATP board or Capital Metro or the City of Austin, really ensure that the community is engaged. And we did that because we heard from community members, right? I still don't know what's going on. You're saying this 300 million, you're saying equity tool, you're saying all of these words, but I still don't know how to engage. And so we made sure that with our proposal of a community engagement framework, we also put a survey so we can hear from you, the community, before we propose anything. And so those are a couple of things that the Mobility Coalition is working on, but we need you here, we need you engaged, and there's a couple ways to be engaged. One is being part of that community advisory committee, that CAC that I spoke about earlier. What the CAC is it's a committee of 11 members, 5 appointed by the existing boards and commission, and 6 appointed from the public at large. The primary requirement is to be a member who has an interest and experience that will assist the committee in developing recommendations on community engagement and equity matters related to Project Connect. And I like to think of this as a community watchdog to ensure, again, that all those things that the ATX Mobility Coalition and others fought so hard that were in these legal binding documents, that they come to effectuation in the most equitable way possible. So we need you to be engaged in that CAC process. And I'll tell you a little bit about how you can be engaged in that CAC process now. Next slide, please. Awesome, thank you, JP. So, all right, Yaz, you said watchdog for Project Connect and all the equity measures, like how do I get involved in that? I hope you are asking yourself that question because we need you to come and help us do the work. One is applying to be on the CAC. Those applications are open until February 28th. If you, oh, I'm sorry, I need to slow down. I'm just so excited about Project Connect and making sure those equity nuances are effectuated. So let me take a breath. So how can I be part of CAC? How can I be part of being a watchdog in order to make sure that equity comes to fruition in Project Connect as it's been promised to me, right? The way you do that is, number one, applying to be on the CAC. We need your voice. We need community members on that CAC. We ensured at the ATX Mobility Coalition that you had a seat at the table. We need you to take that seat and help us do the work. So those applications are open until February 28th. So if you think that you would be a good person to be on that CAC, please, please apply. And please, please tell other people to apply. We need to make sure that community voices are heard in that CAC. And then, stay engaged throughout the process. Applications are one thing, but the nominating committee will review from March 1st to the 5th. Nomination committee will conduct interviews March 8th through the 19th. Then the nominating committee will make recommendations to council and board for appointment March 22nd. And the first CAC meeting is scheduled for April of 2021. So stay engaged in the CAC process. Please apply and please tell other people to apply. But that is not the only way you can be engaged in making sure that all the equity nuances we put in those legal binding documents come to fruition. I also want to talk to you about a second option we have that we created that I kind of talked about earlier, which is our community engagement framework. Our community engagement framework is a document that highlights principles that must guide community engagement. Even though, again, we did all that groundwork before Project Connect was voted on, with our education and our, making sure that all the members understood how important equity was. We've heard from community members that they still don't feel completely plugged in or tuned in. And so that's why we need your input on our community engagement framework. It's just a proposed framework. It's a guide of principles, and it's imperative that this process is developed in a timely manner and concurrent with the development of the equity assessment tool. So what I'd love for you all to do, and what we'd love for all you to do, is read that community engagement framework. See if it works for you. You are the community. Is this how you get plugged in? How do you want to be plugged in? There's also a survey connected to that proposal so that you can literally contact us and tell us all your beautiful thoughts and ideas and actually become part of the solution. We all must work together to turn our concerns into constructive dialogue that turns into actionable change. And we're doing that here at the ATX Mobility Coalition, and we truly hope that you all will join us in doing that. But I have very little concern that you watching are going to do that you are going to engage, because what you're here now at part of yet another thing that the ATX Mobility Coalition is doing in order to try to bridge the gap of information, are community updates. And without further ado, because I'm ready to get into the substance of this bad boy, I'm going to hand it off to my beautiful co-collaborator, Avaz.
Thank you, Yaz, for that beautiful introduction. So as I've said, my name is Avaz Azhar, and I serve on the ATX Mobility Coalition along with JP, Yaz, and so many other great folks. And I really want to thank all of our great panelists who are going to help answer some of the questions. I know Yas talked about a lot of different things right now. There was a lot to take in, but we're going to have some time to unpack that with our panelists and also be able to answer some questions. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start off first with some questions for everybody, and then we'll go to Q&A with the audience. And the idea really is to allow folks to really chime in, ask their questions, and have them answered. So I do want to thank all of our panelists for being here. I want to thank Councilmember Kitchen for being here. She is the District 5 Council member for the City of Austin. She's also a board member of the Capital Metropolitan Transportation Organization, and she's also vice chair of the Capital Area Metropolitan Organization, so CAMPO. She's been involved in this project from the start, and I think she's been a great leader at making sure that we have what we need to ensure that this project benefits our community. I also want to thank Ms. Veronica Castro de Barrera here. She is the board chair of the Austin Transit Partnership and is a licensed architect with more than 2 decades of transit experience. And she's really helping bring some of this conversation forward with the Austin Transit Partnership, which will be leading the Project Connect effort. And as board chair, I know she has a lot of things that she's working on, and she's been part of community conversations before this. So I thank her for being here. I also want to thank Jackie Nierenberg, who is the Community Involvement Manager at Capital Metro and has been involved with this project very much from the start when Capital Metro was figuring out what was the scope of the project and how to move forward. So again, I thank her for being here. We also have Ms. Anique Baudet, who is a mobility officer for Project Connect with the City of Austin. She has been part of the transportation department for years now and has done great work on various different pieces of our transit, transportation, and pedestrian infrastructure, while focusing on a lot of issues around mobility and equity, along with various other things that she's done over the years. And then lastly, but certainly not least, we have Brian Oakes, who's the Chief Equity Officer for the City of Austin. And Brian and his team, and it's a great team of folks there, with Kelly Coleman and Amanda Hasso and other folks who've been working on ensuring that we have a lot of our equity pieces as a part of this conversation moving forward. So again, thank you all for being here. And I'll sort of start off with some questions and then hopefully we can open it up to other folks. Jackie, I'll start off with you because I know Yas just talked about the Community Advisory Committee, but can you talk a little bit more about the role of the Community Advisory Committee or CAC and describe the various ways in which the community can engage with the ongoing Project Connect planning process?
Sure, thank you, Aviz, and thank you all for having me here today. Such an exciting conversation, and congratulations to all of you for making sure that we start off with an equitable process and with the $300 million for anti-displacement measures that the whole country is watching us now because you have done such a groundbreaking and cutting edge thing. So very exciting. I'm also excited about the community engagement framework and how it'll help us do our job better. So the Community Advisory Committee will advise the ATP and including, the City of Austin, Cap Metro, because this is a collaborative effort, Project Connect is, and I'm sorry, I shouldn't use acronyms, the Austin Transit Partnership. I need to charge myself $1 every time I do that. So we've been working on a framework for how the Community Advisory Committee, how can we weave equity into everything that we are doing in the ATP, make it part of the DNA of what we're doing, right? And we have this amazing opportunity to do something huge in this community that's not just about a train, it's about really making a difference in moving the community forward equitably, in dealing with such issues as affordability, which is a real problem in our community. So just so happy to have a Community Advisory Committee to help us steer this enormous project. And the way that we foresee that the Community Advisory Committee will be able to touch every aspect of Project Connect is by connecting with all the other advisory committees and working groups at the ATP. So how can we make sure that there are ears in the room at every one of those meetings? What is the reporting structure so that the CAC, the Community Advisory Committee, is included in the conversations at the table and able to report back to the ATP board and the council and Capital Metro board on how things are going from an equity standpoint. And of course, one of the major focuses of the Community Advisory Committee will be to work with the City of Austin on strategies for anti-displacement, and using a brand new equity tool that's being developed. And by the way, and I know my colleague Anika is going to talk more about this, but also an amazing thing that this equity tool is, being informed by community volunteers who are being paid for their work, that people's time is valuable. And I think the city is demonstrating that it recognizes the value of people's time and energy and intellectual power. So that's a little bit about where we're going with the Community Advisory Committee. You saw the timeline. We're working hard and fast to try to get this done, but we also want to make sure that we're doing it right. It's too important to slap something together. We want it to be deliberate. We want to make sure people have enough time to participate. We want to make sure we were very careful about the application, making sure that we're not creating any undue barriers. And we're lucky that we have partners at the city. The Equity Office is an amazing resource for us to learn how to do this right. So we're just thankful that we have access to that amazing resource to do the work we need to do to make sure that the Community Advisory Committee really informs how we do things equitably with this enormous project that is going to change the way we live in Austin for generations to come. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, Abez.
It does. Thank you, Jackie. And I know that's a lot. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to the self-guided scoping meetings as well.
Sure.
Part of the conversation.
Yeah, so we had a series of scoping, and here's another word, like people don't know what scoping is, right? But we're going through a federally mandated environmental assessment process for the rail lines. We're also doing a similar process for the new Metro Rapid lines, because we feel like even though those Metro Rapid lines don't have to go through that federal environmental assessment process, we want them to have the same exposure to the community and the same opportunities given to the community to participate in the design of those Metro Rapid lines. So in addition to having those meetings, we had the last week in January and then the first week in February, we are doing self-guided opportunities, recognizing that not everybody has the time or the inclination to join us in a live virtual meeting. Although we are getting more participation now that things are virtual, which is a really nice silver lining to see during this time. So these self-guided, we call them virtual open houses. They're basically the same materials that are presented at the public meetings, but people can do it in their own time and provide the same input that we ask for during those meetings. With the Metro Rapid virtual open house. And oh, by the way, those are available at projectconnect.com. And there's a little button that you can click that says get involved, and that'll bring up the opportunities to get involved, including the Community Advisory Committee application. Those virtual open houses for the Metro Rapids are asking for input on the amenities people would like to see at these brand new Metro Rapid stations. We've been hearing over the years from folks about we need better shade, we need lighting, we need more comfortable seating. We need more space for wheelchairs to be able to get around and into the bus shelter. All of those things, this is an opportunity again to get it right from the beginning, right? So we want to hear from you all. What kinds of things do you want to see at your bus stop so that you're comfortable? We want to make it a hospitable experience and accessible experience. And then with the orange and the blue lines, we're asking questions about your environment. And when we say environment, it's not just like the physical environment or, the springs that happen to be under the ground here or the salamanders or any other animals that might be impacted by a project. But we're also looking at the human environment, the cultural environment, the social environment. If there's a place along the corridor for, say, the orange line, which runs north and south, initially it'll be from the North Lamar Transit Center down to Stasny Lane, and it'll expand more later. But are there things along that corridor, the way you interact with that corridor, near where you live, near where you work, that are meaningful to you, that you want to make sure don't get impacted if possible? Those are the things we want to know about. What kinds of environmental topics are important to you? So there's an opportunity to do ranking on those items so that the team starts to get a feel for what's important to the community. Ultimately, when you're doing big projects like this, we're going to be talking some trade-offs. And so we want to know what is the community willing to trade off to get something in return? Those are the kinds of really nuanced conversations that we're going to be having as we move through not only the environmental process, but also the early design process. And oh, I'm sorry, one more thing. Those are going to be open throughout the month. So you have until, I believe, March 5th on the orange and blue line and March 12th for the Metro Rapid survey.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And I shared some of the links to the web pages that Jack was talking about in the chat.
You.
Folks can look at those. Thank you. I'll go to Ms. Castro de Herrera next. I just had a question regarding how do you foresee the Community Advisory Committee engaging with and working with the Austin Transit Partnership Board?
Well, thank you for having me here, first of all. And I know things have moved quite fast in a way, and in other ways, they've moved a little bit slow since we've been dreaming of this plan for more than 20 years. So it's like, it's a beautiful time to be here. So first off, I just want to say thank you for inviting me and for just being open to organize these sessions with the community, because I think the more that we're have open doors and we're out here to engage with all of you and hear directly from each of us our own perspectives, I think is what's gonna make the project successful. So I'm here representing the board of directors for the Austin Transit Partnership, and as you know, we've only had one meeting, so we've had our inaugural meeting. So we're just warming up, right? And so we're staffing up as an agency, as a corporation, as a new government entity. And you all, the community is also now recruiting. So we're both kind of at the very birth of this new initiative. So I would like to ask you all to see how you would like to engage with us too. So when you form, as you put together your availability and who comes, who's been selected to be part of this group, have a great conversation about time availability and what's the best mode of communication with us. Because I think like Jackie mentioned, we have an opportunity to use new tools to engage that have proven to be more successful and more affordable in other ways. Just preparing for today's panel, I was counting my blessings to know that I didn't have to commute, that, I'm in the comfort of my home, being able to be with you guys, and that I have, it makes it easy for me to participate. You made it easy for me to participate. So could this be a way for us to continue to be engaged and use every tool that we have? I really miss person-to-person contact personally, because I do. I mean, I'm an extrovert. I get my energy from people. So I look forward to the days where we can be together. But I think, as the chair of the Austin Transit Partnership, I want to make sure that we put together, that we have, again, that open door policy, but that we all share in the responsibility to be with the community. It's a small board, it's 5 of us, but we are the community. I hope that what you guys see today is that your voices in helping shape who even made up that board is representative of the community. So I would, and again, I don't ever want to speak on behalf of the entire board without first talking to them about what's a good idea as they want to engage. So any deliberations that we're going to have in public, everything is going to be public meetings. So you're going to hear us debate these elements of how are we having this dialogue, and are we really fully accessible and listening well. So I want to almost leave it up to you guys to say, how would you like to be engaged with us? And us, come together into something that's going to be very productive, because the charge is high in making sure that we're going to deliver on time, and that we're going to deliver on budget. So the entire city is going to be looking at us, the entire community. And like Jackie also said, the nation is paying attention, because we're starting something new to solve pressing issues that every community in the United States has. That some cities are shrinking, a lot of cities are growing, but I think for the most part, the cities that are urbanizing have a tremendous challenge to address congestion, equity, mobility, mobility justice issues. And so I hope that with our dialogue and our communication, that we can set the tone, the parameters to do this right, so we can be an inspiration to other cities. I know that we have, to me, this is really what has given me a lot of pause in the enormous responsibility that this entails, because I want to make sure that not only we don't let you down, but that we also correct some past injustices that have been made in the past. So I just want to, I'm glad to be here, and I just want to offer, as the chair of the board, that we have a very open door policy and accessibility to all of you.
Thank you. That's really helpful to hear that context from that perspective. And I'll jump over to Councilmember Kitchen. I know you're going to be part of the nominating committee that will be looking at the applications as they're coming in. And so we wanted to hear from you, what qualities and qualifications is the nominating committee looking for in candidates to the community advisory committee?
Well, first, let me say thank you. Thank you all for having me. I'm very excited about the work that all of you have done and the work that you've done putting together the ATX Mobility Coalition. Each one of your organizations are committed to our community and have done amazing work, and bringing yourselves together is just very exciting for our community. And I want to say thank you to all of you, to the work that you all have done over the past year in putting together the framework that makes sure that, as everyone has said before me, that makes sure that equity is in, I think Jackie said, in the DNA, that equity is what we're talking about with Project Connect. It's not an add-on, it's not an afterthought, it's not something that, oh yeah, we also need to do that. No, it is what Project Connect is about. So, so I'm excited for the future. I think that this is a huge opportunity to do this right, to do this hand in hand with the community. So what are we looking for? I mean, this is about a number of things. I think that you can see the basic qualifications on the website for the application, and those are things like, we are looking for diversity. We want to make sure that we bring and make sure that people have a seat at the table from all different aspects of our community. We're looking for a variety of interest and background and experience that people have to bring to the table. And then, of course, there are a few requirements. You have to be a City of Austin or Cap Metro service area resident. And a few things like that are related to ensure there's no conflict of interest. But what does that really mean? I mean, what does that really mean? I think your question is, what are we looking for? So when we think about what this is to do, and we think about the role of the CAC, and I personally like the way that Yasmin speaks about it as a watchdog, this is what I think we are looking for, and what I will be wanting to hear from folks. So what qualities are we looking for? I'm hoping, and I'm sure, and I trust that we will have people who apply, who can think critically, who will ask questions, and will really think about the implications of what is being proposed to bring their experience and their perspective to the table, and won't hesitate to say, hey, not quite the way to do it. What about this other thing? And have you thought about how this impacts my neighbor or someone like my neighbor? So that critical thinking, that ability to ask questions, that willingness to speak up is really important for this board. I think passion is just a passion for equity, a passion for mobility justice, a commitment to this work and to the community, and a commitment to building and maintaining and trust, and working with the ATP board to and project in the city and Cap Metro to earn the trust of our community. That's necessary. So that passion and commitment is necessary. Creativity is going to be important. I think it was Veronica that said this is new. We're building something new. So we all need to be creative about how that happens and think outside the box and recognize that things don't have to be done the way they've always been done, because we want to make sure things are done right. So a willingness to share, to bring personal experience in community to the table, because those learnings and what people are bringing to the table from their perspective is what this is all about. Problem solving, willingness and ability and interest in working constructively together as a team, I think will be important also, both on the CAC board and with the city and ATP and Cap Metro and with the community. So, and then I would just finally say persistence. There is absolutely no substitute for persistence, but to persistently be passionate, committed to passion and equity, and continue to work for it. So that's what I would say, Aves. That's what I'm going to be looking for. And while I can't speak for my fellow committee members, I would expect that they would say something similar.
That's really helpful. Thank you. I know, that's a question that comes up, like, what are folks looking for? Should I apply or not? So I do want to say, Councilmember Kitchen just mentioned it. I put a link to the application and the description of the Community Advisory Committee in the chat as well. And if you go there, there's a section called who should apply. And I think that should give you a good idea of who should apply. I would say, as a community advocate, if you think you're a good fit, it means you're definitely a good fit. And if you want to apply, you're a good fit. So all I'm going to say is, if you want to apply, you want to be involved in this work, you care about your community, apply. And I think that's the most important thing that you can do, apart from all the various ways in which you can engage in this conversation. Brian, I'm going to jump over to you next. So Brian Oakes, Mr. Oakes, what is the Project Connect Equity Assessment Tool, and how can the community help inform its creation?
Yeah, so I'll kind of take a step back, because for everybody that's following, I will tell you that I am not an expert in transportation, transit matters. So this process has been a learning experience, for me. But when you look at Project Connect, I always sort of say that it kind of reminds me of one of those Sour Patch candies, because it's sweet in the sense that it's access to the rail and rapid bus lines can greatly improve our public transportation system. The bitter side or the sour side of it is the concern around the potential for this, what they call transit-induced displacement, which is, if we build these areas up with great transit, they become attractive, new people want to move there, the people that live there may not be able to actually benefit in the improvements. And that's really what the $300 million is designed to help us, prevent. And so the equity assessment tool is really a tool or scorecard that we can develop and use, to help inform us of how to best use this $300 million in terms of what strategies are going to have the biggest impact to help people stay in place and actually benefit from the public transportation improvements that are happening through their neighborhoods. But also, I think there's parts that the tool can inform that we probably want to have more conversations about. So, for example, Jackie talked about the environmental assessment process, right? And so as we build or design these corridors, there's impacts on the physical environment and there's impact on the human environment or people, right? And so there's equity in decisions around, what block a transit station goes on, or terminal station, as they call them, goes on, right? That matters. That could impact small businesses by people of color. It could impact neighborhoods in certain ways. There's all kinds of engineering decisions that take place in the design and development, and an equity tool can also sort of help influence some of those decisions, as well. So for me, it's a learning process, because I think as you start to see the complexity of these projects, you start to see that there's all kinds of decisions that can be made. And an equity tool, really, ideally, it sort of helps us kind of catch, we would say on the front end, some of those unintended negative sort of consequences that come with the work that has to be done, right? And if a tool is really structured in the right way, it helps us prevent it. But then also, we talk about that a tool can sort of actually help you advance equity too, right? And so as we look to develop this tool, what kind of opportunities presents itself along this Project Connect corridor? So for example, we want to also be able to get into what's our spend and investment with businesses owned by people of color, with all the different projects that come from doing work around Project Connect too. And so that's a whole nother side of what the tool can ultimately help you to be able to do. But our first sort of like call to action is to really figure out how can we sort of leverage this tool around the anti-displacement strategies with the $300 million. And a lot of the work, especially I just, want to give folks insight on that, is that designing a tool itself, almost say that's the easy part, because you can sort of develop a rubric or a scorecard, for something. But I say that it only works as well as the people who are making decisions and who are using it are invested in the work. And so I really loved how Veronica talked about the commitment of the ATP board to equity. Jackie really talking about Capital Metro's commitment to equity. Councilmember Kitchen talking about their committee's commitment to equity, because we have to have all sort of those bodies really sort of centering and holding equity as a value for it to work. Because I said our greatest fear with this initiative is that we would create a tool and it's like the tool that goes to nowhere, because no one really cares about using it, right? And the data and the insight that it gives you, that no one would care about actually sort of putting that into the decisions that they're making. And so we're spending a lot of time around those pieces too. Jackie talked earlier. We actually are working with sort of key staff who are going to be taking on big roles with Project Connect to really offer undoing racism training to them, helping to ground them. We're also going to be looking to set up some workshops for staff that are working on different areas of Project Connect to really talk about the history and the phenomena of what transit-induced displacement really looks like. What have we seen in other cities, and sort of like pulling in those lessons learned, because that's a part of really a tool process too, is that we have to sort of develop the people around it who are going to be able to use that tool. And I think we'll probably have a chance to talk, later with more questions, but there's also a whole body of work of how we design the tool, which I like to talk about more, but I know we got space for other panelists. And so we can probably come back to that to really get into details around how do we actually design and develop this tool too. I think it's an important part of our conversation today.
Brian, and I think that in the way you're talking about how do we make it more directed, and we make sure that it's not just a tool that's sitting on a shelf, but it's a tool that we actually use and apply, and it actually shapes the work that we're trying to do. I think you're spot on that is so important. So before I jump onto my next panelist, I do want to remind folks listening in, if you have any questions, you can type it into the Q&A bar or the chat box. And as soon as we're done with this round, we'll be coming to those questions from y'all. So just a reminder. So Ms. Bode, I'll go to you. And I know that the city is planning for thinking about how do we plan for equitable transit-oriented development and transit-induced displacement. That's something Brian just mentioned. How do we really plan for those issues as a part of this process for developing Project Connect?
Thanks for the question. Thanks for inviting me onto the panel. I want to ditto my fellow panelists and saying thank you to the community for your involvement and your commitment to equity and to Project Connect. To answer the question specifically, I'd like to talk about the groundwork that we did with the Austin Strategic Mobility Plan. And you alluded to it a bit as you were talking about my role at the city and as we embarked on updating a severely updated transportation plan that the city had. And we had as a goal to raise the voices of historically underserved and underrepresented community members to guide that plan, with the idea that sounds cliche, but it's so true. If we do the best with our transportation system as a whole, for those who need access the most to open space, to healthcare, to education, to jobs, we lift the whole community up. And that was, our council got behind that goal. Our council also got behind a data-driven approach of really looking at the Campo model and what do we technically need to do to be proactive about the growth that has been doubling our population every 20 years pretty much, and that what's coming. And so how do you marry those two things? We're sometimes at odds with each other, right? Trying to protect and preserve who's here now while you're also planning for the future. That is a very hard thing for planners, for policymakers, and for the community as they help and are involved with their planning processes. So the groundwork is done, and there's some guiding light there for us. But as we start looking at Project Connect unfolding, I think how the city is starting to look at our planning processes is, one, we have to continue to build trust with the community. And that's not going to be an easy thing to do. We do that slowly, and we go, again, another cliche, but it's true, at the speed of trust. And I think that we're doing better at that. But there's some historical wrongs from the city, from other agencies, that we first have to admit, that we acknowledge, which we did in the ASNP, learn from it, and then try to pivot. And as Councilmember Kitchen said, we want to hear from the community, what's working, what's not. Critical thinking from the community. Maybe we have an idea, but maybe we need to think about it in a different way. And so that's going to be the very first thing that we need to do, and keep that going throughout the project as we were doing planning along the lines, whether that be station area readiness planning or any type of small area planning, what that starts to look like. I know our planning department, our housing and planning department, which recently merged, is looking at models. As Brian mentioned, there are other cities who have done this before us. What can we learn from what has happened with displacement, transportation investment induced displacement? And how can we think about that in our context in Austin, and then do something different for different results? The 300 million is another opportunity that's been mentioned already, but it is a unique opportunity to match programming and get ahead of. I know Brian Oakes talks about getting ahead of and front loading the programming and understanding what needs to happen to take care of people who are here now, who may be struggling, so that they can benefit from the projects as they come online as part of Project Connect. So, and then I'll end with saying how we're looking at the planning is not only small area planning and the trust, but also the NEPA process, the National Environmental Policy Act, that is just now kicking off. It has a public-facing process, and also the City of Austin. So if you're asking about how is the city approaching planning, we're a participating agency, but we're also a partner in Project Connect. That puts us in a very unique spot with regards to how we proceed over the next 2 years with looking at this equitable lens. And I like the way Councilmember Kitchen put it, that it is in the DNA of the project. It's not an afterthought. It has to just be front and center as we embark on this infrastructure investment. And so I'll leave with saying, from a high level, what I learned in planning school, the NEPA process is about avoiding negative impacts, modifying them if you can't avoid them, and then mitigating them if you absolutely can't do any of those first things. And that mimics a lot that I've learned in working with the community, and especially when I worked on the land development code with housing advocates, with the idea that you want to preserve, protect before you produce. And so I think those two concepts really match well together, and that's what I'll be promoting in my role as the mobility officer for Project Connect, as I look at, the technical aspects of utilities and permitting and all those things, but also the social aspects of what we're doing with what happens with the actual people and the cultural and the businesses along the line. So I look forward to working on this with the community, and I look forward to seeing how the CAC comes into fruition. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Anik, and thank you all. So we're going to jump into the audience questions, and I know that we have one that's here and another one that's lined up, so I'll get them as we move through. So the first question is from Nika Arnold, who's asking, what's the process after signing up as a volunteer or a member for the Community Advisory Committee? So I don't know, Jackie, you
Sure.
or someone might have a good answer for that.
Yeah, so I think Yasmin showed the schedule of how the process goes along. And so the last day for applying is February 28th. And then at that time, all of the applications will be considered by the nominating committee for the first week, I believe, in March. And then if the nominating committee would like to speak in person to some or all of the applicants, probably not all, I can't imagine you'd be able to do them all, those interviews would then take place the following week. And the goal is to have the recommendations to the board and city council by the end of March, and have the membership seated by April. And with the objective of having the first meeting of the Community Advisory Committee in April, if possible. I think the plan would be to have the committee meet on a monthly basis. And that's as far as I know at this time in terms of next steps. So we're building on this as we go. But I don't know if, council member, if you had anything else to add that I missed.
Well, the only thing I would add, I think people may understand this, but in case they're not sure, the full city council votes to seat the the members of the CAC, as does the full Capital Metro Board. So both of those bodies will vote on the recommendations that the committee brings forward.
I also want to mention that if somebody needs a paper copy of the application, all they need to do is reach out to us. There's a feedback email on the Project Connect website that actually goes directly to me. And we'll be happy to arrange to have that either delivered or sent or picked up, whatever works best for the community member. So some people may not feel comfortable completing the application online. We can work around that. Also want to mention that there is a Spanish version of the application going to be uploaded early next week. So it will be available in Spanish as well. If there are other languages that community members would like to have the application translated to, again, just reach out to us on the feedback email at projectconnect.com. We will arrange to have it translated for the community member.
And Jackie, I think there's a phone number also that they can reach out to you if they need a paper application.
Yes, the phone number is actually listed on the website, and I don't know it off the top of my head. I am so sorry. But yes, on the website, thank you. There is a phone number you can call as well. In case you don't have access to email, we want to make it as simple as possible. Thank you, council member.
Thank you both. And so just so folks know, I put in the phone number and the email address if you want to reach out. That's in the chat, so everybody should be able to look at it if you need to. Also, I posted the link to the Community Advisory Committee FAQ. So if you're thinking of things like, what is the time commitment that I'm putting in, where we're meeting, what will this look like? Again, I think it's been very clear that this will sort of be created by the committee itself, which will be defining its roles and its goals. That's sort of the exciting part. But if you're trying to understand the parameters of whether you think this is a commitment that you're willing to make, I would definitely go and look at those FAQs as well. So I know that we have another question here as well from Herminia. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Hola, mi nombre es Herminia, soy miembro de Defensa Laboral. Como inmigrante entiendo qué difícil es navegar a Austin. Yo no manejo, entonces dependo mucho de la transportación pública para navegar a Austin. Por los últimos años yo he sido personalmente afectada por los cambios a las rutas, las paradas del bus y que frecuente bien en los buses y esto no me ha dejado poder moverme libremente en mi comunidad y ciudad. Más recientemente, cuando la ruta 300 y 320 fueron cambiadas, esto cambió mi vida por completo. Yo usaba esas rutas para poder ver a mi familia, ir a la tienda de mandado, ir al trabajo y regresar a casa y contribuir a mi comunidad. Es crítico para mí y mi familia que la ruta 300 y 320 regresen. ¿Cuál es el mejor lugar para mí y mi comunidad para que podamos dar nuestras opiniones sobre las locaciones de tránsito? Gracias.
I'll take a stab at that one if that's all right.
Sure, thank you, Jackie.
Yeah, this is a really good question and very important that you asked it, Arminia, because people need to know that there is a way to provide input on our bus service changes. And we do evaluate the bus service several times a year. And frankly, the more people we hear from, the more likely those changes will come to pass. So we encourage you to reach out. You can do it via email at feedback@capmetro.org. If you prefer not to use email, you can call us at the GO line. The Cap Metro GO line is 512-474-1200. We can put that in the chat for you. Yes, if you have neighbors, family members, friends who are experiencing the same difficulties because of a change in a bus line, be it the 300, the 320, or any other, we want to hear from you. There's no way for us to understand the depth, the breadth of an impact that happens when we make a change unless we hear from our community. So really appreciate you asking that question and encourage you to email or give us a call.
Thank you, Jackie. And
we lost your audio, Abbas.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jackie. Thank you. I was going to say, I just put the GO line number and our email address for customer service in there, and hopefully that can be translated as well so folks can have that answered. And Herminia, I really appreciate your question. And I think, those are the kind of voices that we need in the process for the Project Connect work as well. And I think, folks like that who are using this service, who understand the challenges, who also see daily what difference it makes when the service is changed and what new services can bring. I think those are the folks who should be considering serving on the Community Advisory Committee, who should be considering of being involved in various ways as you're able to be involved in this process, because I think those voices are so important here.
I would add to this that, one of the things that's really important in terms of folks that are applying and participating is their understanding and their use of the system, of the bus system, the transit system, because it's by, it's folks who are using the system and are the experts on what we need to be doing to make sure that it's accessible and works for everyone.
I appreciate that, Councilmember, and I agree that's really important. So we have another question here in the chat, and we'll go to that, and then we'll see as other questions are coming in. So we have a question from Abby Hoffman, who's saying, what will this committee's relationship be with Austin's existing commissions, such as Austin's Urban Transportation Commission, Austin's Joint Inclusion Committee, and the Mayor's Committee for People with Disabilities? And I know, Nick, if you want to take a stab at that, or someone else who would like to respond to that.
I can take a stab. I think Councilmember Kitchen can also add on. So I believe that the Urban Transportation Commission, the Mayor's Committee for People with Disabilities, and the Community Development Commission will all be nominating members to serve on the CAC. So there will be a direct relationship and communication back and forth from the CAC and those important commissions to transportation. Councilmember Kitchen, did you want to add to that? There's two
Yes.
CAP Metro committees as well.
Yeah, the two CAP Metro committees, the Capital Metro advisory committees. There's two of them, and I'm looking for the names of them, and I'm blanking right now. But there's the Customer Satisfaction Advisory Committee for CAP Metro, and the Access Advisory Committee for CAP Metro. Both of those bodies also will be recommending a person to participate on the CAC. So that's a, like you said, Anik, that's a very direct connection to each one of those entities. The Urban Transportation Commission, the Committee for People with Disabilities, the Community Development Commission, and those two CAP Metro ones. But the other thing I would say is, and I think Yves may have mentioned this, the CAC is going to create their path. And there's an opportunity to think about, from their perspective, how they might want to work with these other commissions, because these commissions that will have people sitting on the CAC are only part. There's a lot of other committees throughout the city that touch on these issues. And so there is the opportunity for the CAC to work with a whole range of people in the community and on existing boards and commissions.
I think that really gets to sort of the heart of the question. There will, as has been mentioned, those bodies will have representatives on the CAC. So they will be part of the conversation. And then beyond that, I think there will be a lot more conversations. And my assumption would be, and folks can correct me if it's wrong, but like most of our commissions, there will be opportunities for the community to come and talk to the CAC as well. So there will be regular opportunities at their meetings for the community to come and talk to them, which includes other commission members. And so I think there will be lots of these kind of cross conversations that will be happening and need to happen. So I think that's a great question to focus on. As we're waiting on other questions, and folks can definitely bring them in, Brian, I want to go back to you just because you had mentioned it and I was like, well, I want to hear it. You were talking about how do we develop the equity assessment tool? And I know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think, we were having one of our early planning meetings around, trying to figure out, okay, how are we, going to sort of move forward a process to develop this tool. And Kelly Coleman, who's our senior consultant in the equity office, I said she's been organizing since she came out of the womb. But she said something to us, I think that really resonated with our team, was that this tool should be designed and developed by the people who have no choices. And I thought that was really important. And, as we develop this tool, we really feel like it needs to be centered around the people who are really at the margins, right? To Kelly's point, the people that really don't have any choices. And, as we talk about an equity tool for Project Connect, we are unapologetic that tool needs to really lead with race. And if you look at what the number one factor was in the uprooted report that UT did around gentrification and displacement in the city, being a person of color was like the number one risk factor for that. And so we know that the tool really needs to be centered in that. And so as we designed this tool, one of the ways that we are sort of putting that into action is to really have it centered on those voices. We had a call for applications for community members to be a part. We call them ambassadors or catalysts for helping to design and develop the tool. And we're recruiting 30 to 35 folks who we are going to pay a stipend, $25 an hour, because we want to compensate your lived experience we believe is valuable. We're particularly looking for folks who are in the Eastern Crescent in neighborhoods that are actually experiencing gentrification and displacement. Low-income families is prioritized. Transit riders is one of our prioritized categories, as well as ability, language access. And so really being intentional and deliberate around the folks that we center. And I think some of the deeper level conversations around the design or creation of a tool like this is that we use community a lot in our vernacular, our vocabulary, but oftentimes we don't really sort of dig deeper to say, well, there's different levels of community, right? And in this case, when we talk about community and the design of the tool, we really feel like the voices that need to be the loudest, the voices that need to be the most influential are really those folks that don't have the choices, because, we have stakeholders that are community too. And, stakeholders oftentimes have resources, right? And so their voices often sort of drown out just the everyday people who are really impacted by these themes. And so as we go through this process, by providing the stipends, by doing the recruitment of folks with lived experience, we really want to sort of center and give them the power to really sort of step into helping us design this tool from their eyes, And, in addition to that, we'll have a broader community engagement strategy to go along with it. But we are really intentional about holding this space for this group of community residents who are living it to really be the loudest voice in the room to help us design and develop that. And so we actually are kicking off this process to begin the development of the tool towards the end of February. And our first steps is going to be just a series of what we call educational or training workshops for everybody involved. So we'll talk about like history of racism in transportation, what is transit-induced gentrification and displacement, so all these technical things, but really a way to sort of ground and center us so that as we begin to do this work together, we're using the same words, we understand what we mean. We also are being really deliberate around unpacking and sort of getting to any barriers that anybody may experience. Like Jackie sort of mentioned earlier, like with COVID, everything's digital now. And so for the participants that we have, we know some of them have challenges with digital access. So we're going to be getting them equipment from our library so they can have a laptop to actually be a part of these workshops, right? We're going to have language interpretation for all of the workshops. So just really sort of saying that we want you in the room. We're going to do everything that we need to do to make sure that you're able to really be in the room and fully participate in this process. And so, and then we also are going to have a series of what we call design workshops that we're going to be doing with community to really sort of begin to build that out. And as we sort of get that framework, we'll be able to share that out with the larger community. But we are going to be very intentional in this process around centering the folks with lived experience, because we think that they live it and they will see things that we can't see as institutions, right? And because we're in this space all the time. And so we really want to hear those voices who are going to be most impacted by it. And, also Kelly's words still resonate with me today. This is really all about the folks that don't have choices.
Thank you, Brian. And I guess one quick follow-up, which is, will the names of those 30 community members that will be part of this process, will they become available online at some point?
Yeah, we'll share that as part of our group. Like right now, we're going through a process of just reviewing applications and sort of ranking them out and calling people to see if they're still able to do it. What kind of issues will they have if they need computer equipment and different things like that. And so, we hope that maybe in the next week or two, we'll have our finalized list of community members.
Thank you, Brian. That's really exciting, right? Having these folks on board. And I think it gives a chance for the folks on here and other folks in the community to see if their neighbors and loved ones and friends are serving, to have those conversations with them. I think that would be an important opportunity. Councilmember Kitchen, I had another question for you, and that was really looking at, are there other planning initiatives that City Council is considering that will support and work in conjunction with Project Connect?
Well, I think that, as Anik said earlier, really building this new approach, and as Brian has been talking about, building this new approach into everything we do related to transportation. You know, we have these principles built into our Austin Strategic Mobility Plan. So these are the principles that we need to learn from and carry out in any kind of major transportation planning that we're doing. You know, so for example, we have our corridor planning that we work on. So those are bond dollars from a couple of years ago. We have new bond dollars that were approved for active transportation kinds of things. Active transportation meaning trails and bicycles and sidewalks and other things like that. So looking at that through building equity into our choices about where and how we use those dollars will be important. But I think the other thing that we can learn from this is, and Anik had mentioned the land development code and planning. We will, as a city, come back to the land development code at some point. And front and center to the land development code is how do we really focus on and improve our ability for affordable housing throughout the city, and preserving the affordable housing that we have. So I think that these processes that we're learning through Project Connect can also inform us as we're looking at changes to the land development code. And as we're looking to see how we spend remaining dollars from the housing bond that was done a number of years ago. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, to answer your question, another major initiative is land development code and housing related to that. Second major initiative is how we do our transportation bonds. And so I think that learning from this and building our approaches to working with community and building in equity and all the things that we do is going to be really important. And so this process that is being worked through here has much more implications for how the city operates as a whole. So I think it's something we've been building towards as a city because we've talked about and built in these policies, but we've been starting to build a path towards making them real. But I think this is going to help us even more in all of our major initiatives.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And that's something, we talk about in the coalition all the time. We're trying to chart a new path for the way we're doing Project Connect. And if we're successful here, this tells us how we do any and all of our infrastructural development and if our planning around land development code, because there's so much to learn on how do we involve the community, how do we build on equity, and we ensure that really, the folks who are most vulnerable are served by the planning and the work that we're doing. So I really appreciate the kind of thought that Councilmember Kitchen, you and your colleagues on the council are putting into this work. I think that is really critical.
I think one last thing, I think it helps us look at things more holistically too, because, part of what we do now is we have individual zoning cases and we make decisions one by one. So I think we want to, as a city, look at the possibility for improving how we do housing on a more holistic way, for neighborhoods, for parts of town. For all of that. So I'm looking forward to it.
Appreciate that. I'm getting a question from some of my co-hosts, and this is coming from folks, I think, online. So the question is, when can we stop requiring people to have parking along our primary transit investments? So I think understanding that connection between parking and where our transit goes in our corridors. And I know, Anik, if you want to, see if you want to answer that question, or anyone else can jump into that conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, parking is, forever a competing interest that we have in our city, but it's not only in our city, it's across the nation or across the world. Actually, we grapple with, where to put parking. It's not the most sexy land use, let's just admit it. It's not the highest and best use. But we have to have other systems in place if we're not going to rely on a single occupancy vehicle. And so, I feel really proud to be in Austin that we have been developing multimodalism as our goal. And we really made a bold, I think a perfectly bold statement with our ASNP with a 50-50 mode share, recognizing that there is going to be a lot of people in the community that will continue to use a car, but that we can do better with other modes, both from an affordability and a sustainability standpoint. And also from a land use standpoint with the, hopefully the need for less parking if we achieve that goal. So what I'll say is our current code right now, if there are folks who use our current code and know chapter 25.6, section 478, which is parking reductions, there are ways that if you cite your development in a place that is near our existing public transit, our existing wonderful bike facilities, existing good connectivity and walkability, there are provisions that can reduce your parking quite a bit, actually. But you have to do your part. You have to cite your development in a place that can take advantage of where we are today in the maturity of our multimodal system. And so I think that it's a little known fact that there are ways to take advantage of minimizing parking. Also, I know you, commissioners were very much involved with Affordability Unlocked that also went far with regards to addressing parking, with regards to affordable housing and trying to balance those two needs together as well. And so our current code, our current council, our current staff is cognizant of that balance and the need for housing and the space for that. But when our mature transportation, sustainable transportation networks come on board and are more mature, we'll be able to do more with parking and hopefully address it when the land development code comes back. There was some progressive thinking that went into the parking there. There was a lot of community input that we were able to react to as well, and community concern. And so I look forward to doing more than what we currently have in 25.6.478 in the current code.
I really appreciate that. Oh, go ahead, Veronica.
Thanks, Anik, for that great perspective. I mean, I'll bring a little bit different perspective, more of to help understand the challenges of parking. I think that we've had it so vast and so much of it that it especially Texas, that we no longer question it. Almost as in, there's statistics and numbers that tell you that for every human, there's 9 parking spots available, for everyone. And so those depends by city sometimes, but kind of like an average nationwide in the United States. And I like to make a couple recommendations. One is that let's, as we all learn together what the implications are of these very tangible pieces of our urban environment, is I read a great book called Walkable City. And what I love about this book, it's, it tells you like the DNA of a good walk. It's safe, it's comfortable, you have a meaningful destination. And all of these things tell you that when you're walking along a parking lot, next to a parking lot, next to a parking lot, that you don't feel safe, right? I feel better and I feel more protected if I'm walking along what I call the outdoor living room, right? It's benches and trees and there's beautiful windows and planters next to me. And so that environment speaks to what could be aspirational for us. And so in this particular book, what I like is that the author summarized a gigantic other book into one chapter. So it's like the cliff notes of, the title that it has been summarized in this book is The High Cost of Parking, the high cost of free parking. So not only is it vast, but we haven't really, it's been subsidized, right? So we have made it very convenient for everyone to have access to very cheap parking. So I want to encourage people to look up these books. Our wonderful library has the book. They have an audiobook of this book. So it summarizes this particular chapter, because whenever we think of free parking, there's no such thing as free parking. We all pay for the cost of that parking in our coffee that we just bought, or in, the services in our haircut that we just received, right? It's embedded in that cost. There's no such thing as free parking. So reach out to libraries, call the Walkable City, or if you want to read the whole book by Donald Shoup, it's The High Cost of Free Parking.
Thank you, Veronica. And we also have one of our, Cesar Costa, who's an attendee, is talking about Walkable City by Jeff Speck, if anyone is curious and wants to read it. So definitely we'll make a plug for that. I do want to say, this conversation is really exciting, because I'm thinking about the work that, started with enterprise partners and others around the country on what they called equitable transit-oriented development. And, what does that look like in terms of reducing, parking in certain areas where we've linked into transit, ensuring we have affordable housing opportunities, or we have greater housing opportunities. And Veronica, to your point, how do we create that urban living room where people can really enjoy and have a quality of life that we all want for ourselves and our neighbors and our loved ones in this city? So I think there's a lot of great work that needs to happen as we move forward. And I, as we're coming to the end, I have one last question, and Veronica, I'll go to you just to hear from you, because I know it's come up, but how is the ADP board, and I know you're not, you're still all figuring out how you're going to move forward, but how are you going to work to ensure that you're transparent in how you engage with the community, and that you maintain transparency throughout the process of your work?
Yes, thanks for this question. I have, there's the transparency that is required by law, right? We have to abide by the guidelines set by the state, that all our meetings are open to the public, our agendas are published, the deliberations are public, and we're all in, we all have to take the class on what does open meetings mean. I'm new in this role, so I'm learning how to conduct these meetings, make sure that we are not only doing negotiations and deliberations publicly in front of all of you. So that transparency has been set up. Those are mechanisms that are in place by law. And then we also have, transparency because we want to make sure that you all know we care. And like Anik said, we have to rebuild the trust. And I know that trust can be lost really quickly. And I think that, I'm glad, and, Councilmember Kitchen is here because she was part of my interview when I applied for this board position. So she's going to hold me accountable, right? And so she knows exactly what I said in that interview. And here I am, right? But I think also what's important is that, in this transparency, not only do we want to be good listeners, but we want to be able to hear from you what we're doing, where we're going off tracks and where we are doing a good job. Because I think you will see that there's enormous teams of people behind the scenes that put so much love and work into their work that they get deflated if all they hear is the negative, you've done this wrong, And we want to be able to say, hey, what are we doing right so that we can do it more? And you can see the results of that collaboration. Because one thing that I think is going to be very important for all of us to remember is that this is not going to happen overnight. We could all get really exhausted quickly if we lose momentum. So we have to have a relay race that's systematic. And, back to the CAC and back to other advisory committees that we're going to have, I hope that as we invite people to join, that we're also mentoring who's going to take over, right? So that we hand over the baton, the learning curves are minimized and that we can keep the momentum, because I think all of you understand, and why you're passionately here on a Saturday, that transportation, it's, mobility is a human right. And I don't want us to be paralyzed by inaction or aiming for perfection. So I hope that we can all really collaborate closely, and back to the essence of the questions, transparency. I mentioned the law, but I also want to mention that you have our commitment as the board that we will help each other be honest and ethical in our actions, and that everything that we are pursuing is, I hope that you will see and we will be able to prove that it's on the benefit for the whole community. So did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. And I really, really appreciate that. I also, I have time for one quick question. I'll try to make this quick. But before that, I also want to say, thank you to AISD trustee Arti Singh, who's on here listening to the conversation. And she's sort of telling us that she's willing to be part of this conversation and support the work that folks here are doing. So I just want to highlight that and appreciate that because of the work that's happening at AISD and the work trustee Singh is doing that is so important to the work that we're all trying to do here. Anik and Brian, I'll try to, hopefully we can have a quick answer to this, but I know there's no quick answers to these complex, large conversations. But I wanted to check in. I know that one of the next pieces that we're going to be working on is neighborhood level strategies for anti-displacement as a part of this process. That's sort of the next big step. And I wanted to see if we have a timeline on that and when we're expected to start working on those strategies and bringing in those tools.
Well, I'll be brief and then I'll hand it over to Brian. I know that, the first 23 million of the 300 million is available this fiscal year for the budgeting of the ATP board. And so I know that Brian and his team and the team of folks who are working on the equity assessment tool are looking towards the summer. And there was recently a council resolution that spoke to how, and Councilmember Kitchen may want to chime in as well, that spoke to how to start moving and keep that momentum going, as Chair Castro de Valera just said. So Brian, do you want to add to that timeline, and then maybe Councilmember Kitchen can close it out?
Yeah, I mean, from the council resolution, and Councilmember Kitchen can talk more on it. But there was an immediate $23 million that was prioritized for land acquisition as an immediate strategy. And in the contract with the voters, our timeline was to develop the tool within the 6 months of passage. And so we are working feverishly to deliver this tool in the month of probably late May is what we're projecting. And we want to honor that. And I was really going to say, another thing that the community can help weigh in on is conversations around the allocation of the 300 million. Right now, the projected financial allocation of it was to be consistent. I think over is it 12 years of the project? How many, Anik? 13 years, right? And so there's a part of us saying that may be too late. We may need to have more conversations around front loading that 300 million. And I would definitely love the coalition to maybe help inform us about opportunities of things like that. But that's our timeline. So we are working hard, as Anik said, towards the summer to be ready to go, because we know time is of the essence with this.
Yes, let me speak to the resolution that they're referring to. The initial 23 million is for the initial fiscal year, which ends in September, I believe. And so the thinking is let's make sure that those dollars are spent. And the resolution focuses on preservation of affordable housing in areas. So so that is looking at working with with community, with the development groups that do 100% affordable housing, with a focus on acquiring existing affordable housing for preservation purposes. And also a recognition that as soon as the CAC is up and running, and as soon as the neighborhood level strategies are employed, then the people that are participating in those will also participate in the conversation about where and how do you spend the 23 million. What we didn't want to do is lose opportunities right now to preserve existing affordable housing as we're getting all these the CAC up and running, and as Brian's working on developing neighborhood level strategies. And just as a reminder, what neighborhood level strategies means is that how the 300 million is going to be used has to track back to what people want and need in their own neighborhoods to help prevent displacement. So that's why we deliberately talked in terms of neighborhood level strategies. So that's a process that gets built off the equity assessment tool. And then as Brian's talking about, they have to decide how to engage with neighborhoods to talk about, well, what is the strategy that works for you in your area? You know, all the way from buying up affordable housing and protecting it, to helping individuals own their own homes, to helping individuals with their rent for their own homes. There's a whole range of strategies for that.
Thank you, Councilmember Kitchen. And I want to say thank you, Councilmember Kitchen, Councilmember Kasar, and all of Council for working on that resolution and teeing us up for success. And I just want to say thank you to all of our amazing panelists and for all the folks who asked questions. I think this was a great conversation. We'll obviously keep on, working on this, and we'll keep this conversation going from our end. But I just want to give JP some closing out remarks. Thank you, JP.
Thank you, Yves. And I'm actually going to just quickly share my screen here one more time. Here is a QR code that everyone is welcome to scan. And this will take you directly to a survey that we put together about our community engagement framework. And the reason that we as the Mobility Coalition for Austin put together this framework is because we want to make very clear a list of expectations that we have for any kind of community engagement, right? So anytime we say we're going to have community engagement, well, here is a list of things that we expect to see. Here are people that should be in the room. Here are voices that cannot be ignored. So if you want to contribute to what this framework looks like, scan this QR code, and the link is also in the chat. And once again, I just wanted to thank everyone for coming, and please find ways to get involved. If you're passionate about transit, seriously think about applying to be on the Community Advisory Committee. There's a lot of great work that can be done through that committee to help prevent transit-oriented displacement, as Brian mentioned, and so many other key equity things that you can get connected to. So, we're looking for more volunteers, active people who want to get engaged. That's the only way that we're really going to make this project be equitable, is if we commit to sort of paying attention to every piece at every stage as we move along. So thank you all for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Stay warm. Thank you to all the panelists for being here, and look forward to working with you all some more.
Do you all mind if I just make a quick announcement? I feel like there's probably a lot of organizations who are on the call that are helping community. It's going to be super cold this weekend, and just wanting y'all to know that the city is opening up emergency shelters for people to stay warm. And so if you're a single person, you can go to the Central Library downtown. Also, Palmer Event Center has been opened up for families, and they're also doing COVID screening ahead of time, because we also know that it's a pandemic. So just putting that out there for folks, because I know a lot of y'all are trying to help people make sure they have a place to stay and be warm tonight.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Brian. And on that note, everyone stay warm. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday.